Hello, everybody. We're starting 8 minutes late, and we've tried to design this for about 22 minutes, so to leave time for questions at the end. The title, My Whole World Went Zoom, was a line from a very old song that perhaps it's good we're not going to play it because it would show some bad taste in music, perhaps. But it is a nice line, My Whole World Went Zoom. And one of the themes in this talk is, as technology for translation teachers, sometimes we have to initiate people into software. But the great thing about Zoom is that a lot of us have got so used to using it, we don't need to, perhaps it's more a case of saying, what can we do with it? Anyway, a lot of this I think is common sense, but we've just tried to put it all together in one package. So we're going to look at tips and tricks for setting up a meeting, working in pairs to translate and revise in Zoom, working in teams with Zoom, working alone with Zoom, very brief comments about interpreting, and then let's hope we've got time for questions and comments. So next slide, please.
So, hi everybody. Yes, in this case, I'm just giving you some very general tips about setting up a meeting. One of the tips is you can share your login between a team, which means that everybody will be able to be a host, and the team and the meeting will start whenever the first one arrives at the meeting. The second idea is for you to create an endless meeting. I'm showing here in our slide the options you will have to check in order to have an endless meeting. In this endless meetings, you will be able to enter and get out of the meeting as needed, and so it can always be on. Next slide, please. Regarding sharing the screen, this is probably obvious to many people, but as David said, we want to share it, to have everything in one place. It's better if you share your screen, in the full screen, not a specific application, because if you share the full screen, you'll be able to change apps without difficulty. So our idea is to share the full screen. Also, be careful. There are lots of translators with two screens. You'll have to be sure which screen you are sharing. So that's the two things you should need to know. Next slide, please.
Okay, another thing you can do in Zoom is you can point things out. To state the obvious. Now, imagine we've got a translation here. If you look at the last slide, there's something wrong. There's something wrong here. Now, the various ways you can point things out if you're working together is, obviously you can speak, turn the microphone on and say, hey Marco, segment 3 should be Southern Europe, and the segment should end in a full stop. Segment 4 should be westernmost country of Europe. Or you can send a message in chat and type that. Again, there are different workflows and you may prefer one to another. So I think this is almost stating the obvious, but you can just talk to each other while you're sharing. In this case, this is MemoQ, where you could be sharing Tradus or another cat tool. Just share your translation together. And another way is on the next slide, please. Okay, you can also, you've got some drawing tools in Zoom. So you can do various things. You can draw boxes or shapes around words or phrases. You have a stamp. And of course you have arrows. So, and there are some other things as well. Here you can see 3 examples. A box has been put around northern to indicate there's a problem. An arrow is pointing to the Caspian error, and there's a little stamp saying, please check. However, we personally would not advise using these for the reason that we can see in the next slide, please. When you have a large text and you scroll it, you move it up or down, what happens is the annotation marks stay on the screen. They do not move with the text. Put another way, you're actually annotating the screen rather than the word or the text, if you see what I mean. So they are not dynamically pointing to the text. They are statically pointing to a part of the screen. And just one quick tip, if you do use Draw, click on the mouse button to turn it off. Next slide, please.
So regarding sharing the screen, you should share the screen rather than an app. It's easier to change an app on that screen. If you have two screens, be careful which one you share. And don't forget that as a default in Zoom, anybody can share a screen or application. Next slide, please.
Okay, another very, very important feature of Zoom is the ability to offer remote control to somebody. In the main list of commands, one of the icons is remote control. Here we can see that it's been selected, and one of the options here was to give mouse keyboard control to, actually this is my son, Philippe. Marco wasn't available when I made the slide. If you set up a Zoom meeting just with yourself, you do not have the option to give remote control to somebody else. There must be at least two people in the meeting. Now, when you give mouse or keyboard control to somebody, yes, they can. This is not 100% accurate. What it means is you can give the control, but you yourself. What it means is you and another person can move the mouse, or you can use the keyboard. Or as we'll see in a minute, you can also even dictate with voice. So remote control means share the control of. Next slide, please.
Now, regarding remote control, we have some tips. You can make a Zoom account, a common Zoom account that you and your advisor, your team can share so that anybody can start the Zoom meeting with that ID, as we've said before. When you are remote controlling another computer, you can type in the other computer, you can select the program, you can do whatever you want. You are controlling the input and output of the computer, but don't forget that the original computer user still has control of that computer. So you have two people using a mouse and a keyboard. That can be a bit confusing, but as long as you have some kind of strategy, for example, you can say my turn or let me control, or you can raise your hand, everything will go smoothly. So it's just a question of practicing a bit. Next slide, please.
Okay, so here's an example. For example, imagine Marco and I are online. We have an emergency translation to do. We have to do this translation. So it's synchronous. We are working together in real time. We have an emergency job for a client, so we share the screen. We may or may not give remote control to the other person. So there may be one person writing, there may be two people writing, depending on what is most useful. One person can be writing, one person can be giving suggestions. This is useful because you can actually see a translation together. And some online tools such as MemoQ Web Search or RWS, I wrote SDL first of all, but we have to stay up to date. RWS Live Teams, if you're using something like that, you can actually work together online. But with Zoom, two people can translate and revise together at the same time. We're going to give a demo in a second. Next slide, please. And let's imagine here we are, we've done a translation. Now we're going to look at the revision. Again, there's an urgency. The point here is the translator and the reviser, if there are two, you could have two translators or you could have a translator and reviser. They can work together in real time. You don't have to do the traditional translate, send, revise, send back. If you have, for example, an urgent need to do everything as soon as possible, you can work together. As we mentioned before, you can discuss, you can look for errors, you can do that by speaking, discussing, by chatting, annotating. Note this could also be the translation of somebody else. For example, you've got a quality control issue and it could be two other individuals discussing the translation. Next slide, please. You can also have exactly the same setup, but do it asynchronously, not together in real time. Now, for example, we talked about this endless meeting. So you have a permanent connection. Somebody can do this and then they can go, I don't know, have a break. It can be revised just by the other person in the meeting. You know, the translation can be done and then the revision. Then you have to look at what are the advantages and disadvantages of this workflow versus the more traditional one of sending an email with a translation, the person revising, and then sending it back. After that, you could have a final live meeting to check. So we're not saying, we're trying to offer different scenarios, and you can choose what will be best for you. So you can do this without it having to be synchronous. It can be done at different times, asynchronously. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to do a demo, so I'm going to just share what we just saw. Hopefully I can, let me just see if I can see my controls. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, for example, oh, by the way, for our demonstrations, we're translating English into English. This is artificial, but we thought the best way was rather than do English Portuguese or, you know, so it's a simulated translation, and just so we don't have any puzzles about the translation, we're doing in English. So, of course, I'm now typing. Marco, do you want to type now, please? Sorry, that's because it's in the translation memory.
So now I'm the one typing. So I'm doing this in David's computer.
Okay, and I could basically say, hey, Marco, just be a bit careful. But on my computer, I just revised what Marco has just translated.
Exactly.
Alternatively, Marco can annotate. Yeah. Would you mind putting some annotations for the word revision, please?
Yeah, just a bit. So you have something here that needs changing here in revision. So you can.
Okay, could you draw, perhaps draw a box We can put a circle around something. We can put the stamp, for example. There are various, basically, Marco's trying to show the annotation symbols. But again, if we were to, this text is very short, but if we were to scroll up or scroll down, we would lose the annotation. Marco, if you want to start getting the dictation ready, if that's okay, I'll clear this. The annotation, you can actually clear everything. And you have to be careful to click on the mouse. Right. Now, just something else we want to show you is, this is actually MemoQ, a commonly used CAT tool, of course. One of the features that MemoQ has is a dictation facility. What Marco's doing is turning on the dictation facility. And I'm sorry this is very amateur, but if you look on my phone, you'll see there is an app with a microphone symbol that says, "Hey, MemoQ." What Marco's doing is connecting his phone to MemoQ, and we're going to see if it will work. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. So we're going into great danger here. I feel like we are on a stage in Las Vegas and we are slightly gambling. How's it going? Oh, there we go. Can I go? I'll close it, yeah? Do you want to try and...
Yeah, I'll do that. It has been a member of the European Union since 1986.
Okay, Marco, if you just turn it off, if you don't mind. Now, it's perfectly... I'm going to just show you that I can also use this. If we have time...
Just to underline that, I just finished dictating something in my phone in David's computer, and we are not even in the same city. So we used Zoom to dictate at a distance.
And I think even MemoQ was not aware of this when we showed it last year to them. Portugal is a very popular holiday destination, but it is sometimes overlooked in favour of larger countries like the Ukraine, Russia and Italy, full stop.
So, David, you have two mistakes there. You wrote Ukraine and Russia instead of France and Spain.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So again, there. Oh, by the way, if you dictate, remember to turn it off, otherwise... So there you are. I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to the presentation. Would you put the presentation back on the screen, please, so we can go back to... I stop the share, don't I? Let me just see.
It's okay now.
Okay, can everybody see the presentation? Okay. Now, I hope that was clear. In my experience, when I actually see something done, it's so much more useful than it being talked about. Right, let's quickly finish the presentation so we can have questions. There's a use of Zoom that's very simple again, but which we call on-call. So imagine, in our case, imagine there's an English-Russian or an English-Ukrainian translator. In our case, I'm a Portuguese-English translator. Marco's an English-Portuguese translator and company owner and so on. So many times when I'm translating Portuguese to English, I think I know what the translation content is, but I would love to have a native Portuguese speaker next to me so I can say, hey, am I right? Is this what I think it is? What you do is you start an endless call and you turn the sound off, turn the video off, and you just have the Zoom meeting minimized in your taskbar. As problems occur, you just contact your colleague, however you have arranged. Maybe it would be social media, Messenger, WhatsApp, something else. And you say, hey, I've got a couple of problems. Can I just show them to you and get your opinion? Then you can open up the Zoom, share, for example, MemoQ or Tradus or whatever you're using, and ask the native speaker of that language for help. Or, of course, Marco could do that with me for English when he's translating English to Portuguese. So it's like a language consultant on call. If that sounds, and actually you could have that for several. You could have a reviser with more than one person doing that. If that's complicated for you, you could agree, for example, every day at 4 p.m, you have a Zoom meeting to clarify doubts. Okay, so that's another use. Next slide, please.
Regarding the Zoom as a project management tool, not only in small companies or big companies or just teams of translators, it's very useful to have Zoom as a way of meeting the team before the translation starts. We can talk with translators and revisers and try to solve any doubt that arises. We can show some features of the translation, for example, file segmentation problems, some language problems, and we can do this in a meeting, which is much better than trying to write some kind of email that everybody should understand, which is not the case in many cases. We can even standardize terminology using Zoom. We can clarify other options. We can even be a kind of support team for translators if in the project management perspective. So if a translator has a problem, we can access the computer and try to solve the problem directly, showing the translator how we are doing it, which is something that not only allows us to solve the specific problem, but also to help people learn how to solve that problem. And this can also be done the other way around. So sometimes translators teach project managers how to solve problems. The fact is, everything we are talking about could be done with other specific tools, but the fact is everybody uses Zoom nowadays, and Zoom allows us to have everything in just one app that most people already know how to use, and that's very useful for a team and for a project manager. So next slide, please.
Yeah, and of course we're talking about Zoom, but there is other similar software. A lot of people use Microsoft Teams, investigate what you can do. Another use is, of course, tech support. Imagine you're onboarding some new translators into your company or your teams, and they're going to have problems. Here I've just shown a couple of things, aligning in MemoQ and making the term base in Tradus. But the great thing, of course, of Zoom is you can have a quick Zoom meeting. You can actually share, for example, MemoQ or Tradus with the translator. The translator can indicate their problems, and you can solve in real time. Now, a few years ago, or even still nowadays, software was used. If you had a problem with your computer, you would sometimes ring somebody and they would ask you to install something so they could take over your computer. Software like something like TeamViewer. So that the technician, the tech support would remotely control your computer once you'd installed something. I mean, really, this is the more up-to-date version of that, if you see it, if you see what I mean. Next slide, please. Now, how to use Zoom with yourself. No, we haven't gone schizophrenic. Let's have a look at what we mean by that. So, one person working with two machines. Imagine you have your desktop PC at home. Start an endless meeting if you can. Set up your cat tool and translation. You yourself are somewhere out of your house and you log in remotely on Zoom, for example, on a Mac, on an iPad. Once you've set up, you can actually, and set up a remote control, you can actually translate at a distance without actually needing a PC, if your software is PC. This means you're using another device that's not Windows to translate Windows translation software. Several years ago, I tried to show this using TeamViewer to my students, and it was a little bit geeky, a little bit too technical. But I think with Zoom, it's far less technical. Next slide, please. Just before Marco explains this, I've very often been in my office dictating on one computer, or you could even use a phone, although I'm too old probably to use a phone as I find the screen very small. And I can be working and dictating into my computer at home. We saw dictation, but just to sum up, Marco, would you?
Yeah. So regarding dictation, this is just to sum up what we showed in the demo. You can use the iPhone app, a MemoQ, which is for anyone who uses MemoQ. It's a free app, so you don't need to pay anything else. So if you already have MemoQ, you can use it right away, as long as you have an iPhone. So this is just for iPhones. You can turn dictation on in MemoQ, and you can start dictating in MemoQ. You can use a Zoom meeting, so as we showed. You can have Zoom in your home PC, and you can set up the cat tool and translation. You can log in remotely and dictate using your iPhone. If you are away from the computer, if you are near your computer, you just need your iPhone and your computer. So you can translate by dictating either in your computer or remotely using Zoom as the connection app. In fact, when you give control of your keyboard to another device, you are giving control of all forms of input in your computer. So dictation can be done through Zoom. So this is, as we said before, this is another option. We are giving you a menu of options to use Zoom in translation. Next slide, please.
And in fact, most phone manuals don't use the word dictation. They talk about voice typing. Okay, obviously there are uses of Zoom for interpreting. We're not interpreters, so we just wanted to say, think about this area. Obviously you can share an audio or audiovisual resource and somebody can interpret. In fact, I think some wonderful people are doing that right now as we speak. So thank you very much for interpreting our talk. There's also a live transcript for some languages, so you could use that to help you for interpreter training. Next slide, please. Sorry that's so quick, but we kind of run out of time. Well, I think we've managed to do it in, we get it within time.
David, do you want to show the
first screen?
If you want to show the first screen, just to give you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
just
David.
To finish, to show the first screen, please.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Marco.
I'm sorry,
Wait.
Yeah. If you could show the first screen, that would be the first screen, the first slide, that would be great. And I don't know if there's time for any questions, but we just wanted to say one thing about the very first slide.
The whole wide world went soon. Moonbeams dancing in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Shadow.
actually, that wasn't it. That's very nice, but there's something else on the first slide. I'm so sorry. But that is very nice, very sweet of you. Thank you very much. There you are. That's how Zoom came about many years ago. The very first slide has the link to the slide. So if anybody wants to get the copy of the presentation, you're welcome. There you are. If you take a photo of that, the presentation link is there. I don't know if there's time for any questions.
Yes, unfortunately, we don't have any time for questions, but thank you very much for your presentation. Nowadays, the world changing so fast, and we have to adapt to those changes. And you gave us so strict to the point recommendation to enhance our cooperation in this online world. Thank you.